Hello there, Michelle Shorts here, and I'm delighted to be joining you today to create a clean and simple scene using the present time stamp set. So I'm stamping out 3 of the images here from the present time stamp set onto some smooth white cardstock, and I'm using extreme black ink for this. So I'm using the mini Misty here just so that I can double stamp them, just so that I get a really nice dark impression. And this ink is really good for lots of different mediums. Today I'm going to be colouring in my images using Copic markers. So I'm starting off by colouring in the trees here, and I'm using my favourite green colour combination for kind of a greenery, I suppose. So this is the G29, the YG17, the YG25, YG03 and YG01. And I really love this combination because you get quite a lot of contrast between the darkest shade and the lightest shade, but it's quite a kind of bright green combination, and I think it just adds some brightness into, you know, particular cards, especially for scene cards where you have a lot of blue and things like that in the background. I think it just kind of brightens them up. So I'm going in here with the YG25, blending out the darker colours. Just kind of going in circular motions with the Copic markers. I like to colour darkest from lightest, but I know a lot of people like to colour lightest to darkest. Whatever works best for you. So I'm going in here with my lightest shade here, which is the YG01, and just blending that all together. And like I said, this adds quite a bit of brightness to the green shades. And then I can colour in the trunks of the trees, and I'm using E59, E57 and E55. And then I do go ahead and colour the other tree off camera, and I just did the exact same colour combinations. And then for the snowman, for his actual body, I'm going to use some BG colours. For me, it depends on what I'm doing in the background to what colour I tend to colour white things. So this snowman ordinarily would be white. And so if I was to have a background with purples in, for example, I may colour the snowman with purple shades or blue shades or whatever, depending on the background. My background, I'm going to have some green and kind of tealy, turquoisey type colours and some dark blue, and so I thought that the BGs would work quite nicely for this. So I'm using BG11, BG10 and then BG quadruple 0, and then I do go in with the colourless blender just to make sure that that's going to blend out nicely to white. For the nose, I'm using YR18 and YR15. And then for the scarf, I'm using B18, B16, B12. And right at the beginning there, I did get a little bit extra of the blue colour into the snowman's body. And I do go back and try and rectify that. Because of my camera setup, I'm not quite over my images, and ordinarily when I'm not filming, my face is really close to the image where I'm colouring. That's just unfortunate how I happen to colour, and so I did accidentally get a little bit of that darker colour, but I'm using the lighter colours of the BGs and I'm just pushing that back in, and for the most part you pretty much can't see it at the end. So just using those lighter colours, because they're so light, they've got more of the colourless blender in them, and so it tends to push the darker colours out, which is really nice. So I'm just using the same colours there on the present that I did on the scarf, and like I said, I'm trying to match the colours of the background with the colours that I'm colouring in the image. I do really love cards that have loads of bright different colours in them. But for me, I do tend to try and colour coordinate the images with the background. Like I said, I am having my background to be blues, greens and kind of turquoisey colours, so I thought that they would work nicely for the image as well. Sometimes I do the background first and then colour in the images so that they colour coordinate. Sometimes I do it where I'm colouring in the image first and then work out what I'm going to use for the background based on the image. Just depends on the card that I'm making. So for the bow here on the present, I'm using BG57 and BG53. And then for the little button on the snowman, I'm using C8 and C6. Once I've finished colouring in the images, I'm then going to die cut them out with the present time Die-namics set. So I'm just placing those dies over the images, holding them down with some low tack tape, and then I can run those through the die cutting machine. Next up, I'm going to create my background for my images to be in, and I've got a piece of smooth white cardstock here, and I have the Drifts and Hills stencil, and I'm going to use that to create a snowbank on the bottom of my panel here. And then I'm going to do some ink blending with distress inks above it to create a sky. You could definitely cut out panels of white cardstock or any colour cardstock and add them on top for the snowbanks, but I quite like to often just mask it off, and so it's all one layer, and anything you add above it, like the ink blending, will automatically look like the sky, and then the bit at the bottom that you've masked off will automatically look like a snowbank, even though you haven't actually added anything to the snowbank, if that makes sense. So like I said, I'm using distress inks for the sky, and my first colour was cracked pistachio, and now I'm going in here with peacock feathers, and I really like this colour combination together, more of a greeny toned kind of turquoisey-ish colour, and then more of a blue toned turquoisey colour, which I really like. And then for my darkest shade at the top, I'm going to use Faded Jeans, and I'm just going to turn my panel here. I find ink blending for some reason better to do sideways rather than kind of like as a portrait style card. So just using some ink blending brushes here, I find that I get a really nice smooth result using the brushes for the most part. So I'm just using the brushes here, and I'm kind of going from one colour to another. I just put down a layer to start with of the 3 different colours, just so that I know where I want the transitions to be. And then I can go in then with the other colours and add more layers to it, and it just takes a little bit of time to build up the layers and get a really nice smooth blend between the 3 colours. I am going to add some splatter on top, so I'm not too concerned with how smooth it is, because for the most part a lot of it will kind of get covered up and you won't see it as much. This here is a mini mister with some perfect pearls and water in, and I'm just using the nozzle here and just splattering that on the background. The stencil is still in place at the bottom, just so that none of this splatter that I add on top goes onto the snowbank, but it wouldn't really matter too much if it did. And then I'm also going to add some white gouache here, so I'm just placing some of that onto a non-stick mat and then adding a bit of water to it, just so that it's a bit more of a kind of thinner consistency to be able to splatter with. And this is going to kind of look like snow added onto my background here, onto my sky. So I do apologise for the lighting in this clip here. The sun was kind of going in and out here in London, so I do apologise for that, but hopefully you can still see what I'm doing. Just adding quite a bit of that gouache there just onto the sky. The closer that I add the splatters to will be thicker, and then smaller splatters as it's further away. And then I can just remove that stencil at the bottom, and I really love that crisp edge there with the ink blending above it. So next I've added some foam tape onto the back of this panel. I have let it dry for a little while. To be honest with you, it's not completely dry at this point, but I'm trying to be careful to not kind of smear anything. I've added some foam tape onto the back of my trees, and I'm just really lightly placing them down just so that I can see where I want them to go before I adhere everything down properly. So I've got my little snowman here, and because he's going to be overlapping the tree on the left hand side, I just need to add some foam tape on the right hand side, and then I can add a bit of tape runner on the left hand side. So just taking off the backings of that foam tape and then placing that down onto my little scene here. And then off camera I did stamp and heat emboss a sentiment from the present time stamp set, and I embossed that onto a black cardstock and cut that down into a strip. And here I'm just figuring out where I want the sentiment to be. I'd originally planned to have it in that top right hand corner, and I did end up putting it there, but sometimes I like to just move it around just to double check where I want it to be. So once I'm happy with that, I can press that down. And then to embellish the card, I'm going to add some iridescent bubbles, just using some on point precision glue just to keep them in place with the embellishment wand here. So just adding 3 of those. I like to add them around the sentiment strip. And then I'm just taking some aqua shimmer pen here, and I'm adding that onto the scarf and then also the bow on the present. Now I don't know how well you can see on camera, but the aqua shimmer pen blobbed all over my scarf. I tried to carry on, and the problem with this is that in real life probably most people won't notice it, but I did notice it, and it was really annoying me, and I couldn't figure out how to kind of fix it on the image. So ultimately I decided to take this snowman off, stamp him and recolor him and add a new one on top. I was really careful while I was peeling him off, and thankfully I didn't damage any of the background, which was really helpful. If I had damaged it slightly, because I'm adding another one on top, it wouldn't have mattered too much. But as it turns out, once I'd done this new snowman, I placed him a little bit lower in the scene, and I did prefer that. So you could kind of say it was a silver lining that I messed up, although I'd rather have not have, to be honest. But in the end, it worked out for the best. So this time, before I add the aqua shimmer on, I'm just going to make sure that I kind of brush that away onto a scrap piece of paper first, make sure that there's no blobs. And that's the card finished for today. I hope you've enjoyed watching. Links to the products that I used will be in the description bar here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.